Hey everybody, welcome back to Reach and Reverie. Today is July 18th and boy, I have a huge harvest that we're gonna bring in today. Since I'm over here, let me show you. This is the Gilia Globe. I've been waiting all season to bloom. This week we're gonna start with the front garden because it just takes my breath away and I can't even make it back to the back garden without stopping to have things to talk about. This week I'm bringing my trusty basket and harvesting shears because we have a lot to gather today. I am just astonished that this zinnia is still looking as beautiful as it is. Everything over here is doing pretty good. I'm actually really surprised as well that my pansies are still flowering because it is pretty hot for pansies and they are going strong as well. My noodle beans have finally reached the top of the trellis and I'm hoping that it'll fill out because we have plenty of season left for these beans to give. I am going to go ahead and harvest these noodle beans, as beautiful as they are, to try to keep this plant more productive. The thing is, plants produce fruit as a way for them to reproduce because the fruit holds seeds. So if you leave your fruit on your plant actually won't produce as much fruit because it thinks that its job is done. It says, hey, I have my offspring in these pods right here. I don't need to waste more energy growing more beans. And so it stops being as productive. So what I'm going to do is, as these beans start getting about this long, I'm going to go ahead and harvest them so that the plant thinks, oh, I don't have any offspring growing on me. Maybe I should produce more beans so I have a better chance at reproducing. Plants are smarter than we give them credit for. Wow, look at that. That's got to be like 18 inches, 12 inches on these beans right here. They're almost as long as my basket. And look at this. This is what a noodle bean flower looks like. It's a really pretty lavender and yellow colored flower, and look at that. There's a little tiny baby noodle bean right there starting its journey. I do have more noodle beans over here. This one I'm gonna let get just a little bigger. Right now it's probably about 8 to 10 inches. And then this noodle bean is massive. He's actually starting to dry up. If I were to leave this bean on here, I think that he would make some dry beans for me. I am gonna go ahead and harvest him though. He is a lot bigger, but I do want this plant to stay productive. I'm probably gonna chop these noodle beans up and add to my pickles that I'm gonna make today. Wait till you see the pickles I harvest in a little bit. These noodle beans are gonna complement those pickles nicely. My nasturtiums have decided to flower this week, and aren't those lovely? I have dark orange over here. We have some light tangerine orange and even some creamy yellow. Very beautiful nasturtiums. And my Tigger melons have grown almost another foot, maybe even a little more since our last video last week. I think they were all about this tall. So yeah, I guess they've grown about a foot this week. So I actually gifted my sister some Tigger melon seeds, and her plants are loaded down with fruit. I am so happy for her, and I'm just hoping that ours start producing here in a little bit too. I'm really excited with this noodle bean. He's starting to branch off and grow even bigger and spread out. I am really hoping that we can get some coverage on this trellis, hopefully before the end of the season, before the frost comes. Over here, I have a peanut that's flowering with some bush beans. We have some tomatoes, lots of tomatoes. Beautiful Juana's orange amaranth, beautiful. And a nice, lovely white borage plant right there. My bush beans over here are doing really good, being very productive. It's like they got another wave of production, even though bush beans are most productive earlier in the season when you plant them. Now my tomatoes over here are growing so big. Do you see this? It looks like I might even have one that's ready to harvest back there. You see that red peeking through? I'm gonna have to climb around to the other side and see what we've got going on. And look at that. Wow, that's a Chihuahuan desert star right there. And my Dr. Weiss's, I might even have to support these. Look at how heavy they look pulling down on that plant. So I'm gonna go ahead and harvest these tomatoes and then we'll continue on with our garden tour. All right, so it looks like we got 2 Chihuahuan desert stars and 2 of the white currant tomato. Now something I want to show you is look at how many mushrooms we have growing in these garden beds. You see these? These are all mushrooms. Now, when I started out gardening, the first time I saw mushrooms in the garden, I was a little worried. I'm like, why are these growing here? I didn't plant these. I don't know what's going on. Are these gonna kill my plants? And the cool thing is that in a lot of cases, mushrooms are a sign that you have a healthy soil. Because if mushrooms are growing in your soil, then other micronutrients are growing in your soil as well. So it's a good sign generally that you have a healthy soil, and it's usually nothing to worry about. So when I see mushrooms growing in my soil, I take it as a little compliment. The soil is telling me that it's nice and healthy. It is actually really hot today, and I'm harvesting these tomatoes at close to the hottest part of the day. And that's on purpose because tomatoes store a lot of their flavor into their fruit when it's really hot outside. And when you water your tomato plants, you actually dilute the flavor. So I have not watered these plants today, and I'm harvesting at a hotter time in the day. That way these tomatoes can taste their best. So before you harvest your tomatoes, don't water them that day and harvest them in the heat of the day if you can. And that way these tomatoes will taste sweeter and they'll be packed with more flavor. These okra flowers really take my breath away. Look at that. Okra are in the mallow family, which is relatives are things like marshmallow and hibiscus. And these flowers are so reminiscent of hibiscus flowers. So look at this. We gave them some watermelon this morning, and they've already cleaned it all the way down to the rind. All right, guys, before we go into the garden back here, I want to show y'all my Pekin pepper that I have growing over here. Oh, look at this big bumblebee. You see him? He is huge. Very beautiful. He flew off. Man, he's pollinating these. He needs to go over there and pollinate those for me. So this Pekin pepper right here is living proof that you can overwinter and grow peppers as perennials depending on where you live. Look, little buds. Little pepper buds. We're gonna have peppers this year. Look at those. You see them? They're tiny, 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 tiny. So, the backstory on this Pekin pepper. This Pekin pepper has been on this property for longer than Luis and I have been on this property. Luis and I moved onto this property about 4.5 years ago. And before we lived here, my sister lived here for a while as well. And this pepper plant has been established for longer than we've been here. Now, Pekin peppers do grow natively in the wild here in this region. I live in far western Texas in the Chihuahuan Desert. And this plant grows wild all around here. You can see these when you're on hikes. You see them out in the desert. They grow here, they thrive, they love it. Now, this is a frost tender plant, and it does suffer during the winter, but you know what we do? So every single winter, once we hit that first frost, this plant looks like anything else in the garden. It looks dead. It loses its color, it loses its leaves. All of the green growth on this plant turns brown and like woody and barky like a stick. But you know what we do? We just let it sit, and I've never pulled this plant out. We let it sit, and in the spring I prune it down really low to the ground. I cut off almost all of the growth that's sticking up above the soil. And guess what? When warm weather comes, when it starts becoming the weather that peppers like and what peppers thrive in, it starts growing again. And not only does it start growing again, it thrives. This Pekin pepper is a really small pepper variety. The fruit on this pepper are smaller than green peas. They are tiny. They're like half the size of my pinky fingernail. Super tiny fruit. So this plant, you would think, would be a really small plant, and I'll show you. I actually started some Pekin peppers from seed from this plant this year in my garden. They're not even half the size of this plant. So because this is a really established plant, it has more energy in its root systems that when it does come back, it can come back bigger and stronger and faster than any of the peppers that we start from seed because it's well established. Oh, that bumblebee's back. You see him? She is really beautiful. Look next to a honeybee that flew right by her. Her size. She is big. We're gonna leave her alone. So there's some food for thought. What do you lose if you leave a pepper plant that you're sure is gonna die in the winter? Maybe you lose the space where you would have planted like a brassica or something if you're gonna do a winter garden, but a lot of people don't do winter gardens. A lot of people will grow in the spring, summer, fall, and then when that frost comes, they might take a break from gardening and start again in the spring. So if that's you, and you live in a zone where it doesn't get much colder than -5 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have the space for it, that would be a cool experiment, a cool challenge to maybe let your pepper plants be as they are. When that first frost comes, just let them sit all winter long. And when the spring comes, when you're close to that last frost date and it starts to warm up, prune back all of your tomatoes really close to the ground and just wait and be curious, and maybe you might be surprised by the life that finds a way. I'm not telling you that they will survive, because almost everybody says that peppers are not frost hardy and they die with freeze, and that might be the case where you live, but at least that Pekin pepper is living proof that even if something is cut and dry, black and white, set in stone, maybe it's not as much as you thought. Peppers are known to be annuals, and this pepper is an example of being a perennial. Isn't that kind of cool? So, with that said, welcome to the back garden today. Into the gate we have my peanut. This is the Ecuadorian pinstriped peanut, and this is my peppers and basil bed. I think it's time to harvest some peppers and some basil. Look at these peppers. These are the ones I left on the plant last week to let get bigger, and they are already doing pretty good. So what I do with my peppers is I usually add like maybe one to a dish to give it a little bit of heat. One is plenty, they're really spicy. Or I will add them to my pickle jar, or I will even freeze them, or you can dehydrate them, or you can make pepper flakes. Peppers are super versatile. I'm gonna harvest some more pepperoncini peppers this week. It looks like we have quite a few that have grown to a good size this week. And I made my very first batch of pickles last week. I actually made pickled peppers out of the pepperoncini pepper, and they were delicious. It makes me wonder why I've never made pickles before. Like, wow, these pepperoncini peppers They kind of, to me, taste like a thin-walled, mild bell pepper. And when pickled, they are just delicious, delicious. So I am super excited to harvest these today because I'm gonna throw them in my pickle batch that I'm gonna make this afternoon. Those are the pepperoncinis for today. I did leave a few little guys on here. My habanada plants have grown really big this week, and I'm hoping that we start getting some real fruit production pretty soon. There's a little habanada, because look at all of these little blossoms. These plants are covered in blossoms. So I'm hoping that within the next probably week or two, I'm gonna be harvesting a bunch of habanadas. Really nice plants right there. So if you're new to our channel, let me go ahead and tell you what we've got going on here. We have 3 habanada plants on the end. We have 3 pepperoncini plants right here. I actually do have 2 Pekin plants. They're these little ones right here. There's one here and there's one under there. I have 4 basil plants. 2 are the green sweet basil, 2 are the dark purple opal basil. I've got a couple of cayenne pepper plants. There's a cayenne pepper right there. We have shishito pepper. I'm gonna harvest these here in a minute. Look at those beautiful shishito peppers. I have Brazilian starfish, are these really tall, lanky plants. And it looks like we're gonna start getting some Brazilian starfish here pretty soon. Look at that flower, how it's white, but it's also green. Those are pretty. And then of course the Buena Mulatas, which we already harvested from. I have some cubanos. We have 3 cubano plants right here. And then, can't forget my bell peppers. I have an albino bell pepper, and then we have lilac bell peppers over there as well. So in this space, I have 21 pepper plants and 4 basil plants in this 3-foot by 8-foot bed. You can plant peppers relatively close together because they like to, what you'd say, hold hands. They like for their leaves to touch the other plants. It gives them more support and they just do better. So I'm really happy with our pepper success that we've had this year so far, and the potential for all of the peppers we still are gonna get this season. So I am harvesting 2 shishito peppers today. However, I am gonna leave the rest of these on the plant so that they can get bigger. This plant is loaded with fruit and flowers. See, that's what I'm used to seeing, a white flower. These Brazilian starfish are so neat in that they're white and green. So, yeah, these shishito peppers are loaded with fruit. There's fruit all over it, but I am gonna wait. I don't wanna harvest these too little. I wanna get more value out of these peppers, so I'm gonna go ahead and probably wait a few more days before I harvest the rest of these. I am gonna harvest some basil today. This is the beginnings of wanting to form blossoms, where it starts getting these really clustered, close together growths. And so I harvest above 2 new growths. So each of these 2 growths will form into 2 separate branches. The more you harvest from your basil, the bushier your plant will be, in theory, if you give your plant time to grow. So I'm just gonna harvest all of these growths that look like they want to flower. I talked about basil in my last garden tour, the June 11th garden tour, and we talk about how if you let your basil flower and it successfully starts flowering and producing seeds, the plant actually will change its flavor and it won't be as palatable. It won't taste as good. You could still eat from it. You could still cook with it. I mean, it's basil. Basil to me tastes good, but the flavor will get less sweet and a little more bitter. And that's because the plant is trying to tell you that it's not good to eat anymore, because it wants its flowers to turn to seeds. It wants its seeds to fall to the ground, and it wants the seeds to grow into more basil. So it doesn't want to taste good so that it isn't eaten, so that it can reproduce. It's actually a really brilliant survival strategy. But if you stay on top of picking all of these off, you can keep your basil more tender and tasty for longer. That's one of the best smells. All right, so I think this is even more basil than we got in last week's video. And I do harvest this 1 to 2 times during the week between garden videos. That shows you basil grows explosively fast when it's hot out. Over here, I have this marvelous giant yellow marigold, and it smells really good. I also love my red marigolds and some of the ones I have down here as well. This is a cosmos. I just sprinkled the cosmos seeds in here, direct sown, before I actually planted this garden bed out, and he is growing up nice and big. I am also gonna harvest some fennel today. When I made pickles last week, I used fennel in my pickle jar in place of dill because I didn't have any dill. Now fennel, to me, smells and tastes like licorice, and it adds a nice flavor to your pickles. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't add like a licorice flavor to the pickles, but it adds a nice flavor to your pickles. If you don't have dill, it's a good substitute. So I'm probably gonna add a few sprigs of fennel today. That smells really good. It smells just like licorice to me. And look at this. Guys, this is my chrysanthemum melon. Isn't he cute? He grew so big this week. He was about this big last week. And now look at that. Keep growing, little buddy. The chrysanthemum melon ripens to white. Over here, my tomatoes are super explosive this week. There are tomatoes everywhere. We have the big ones back there. I have a ton of tomatoes growing all up through here. Look at these. Super ribbed tomatoes. I'm thinking I mixed up my tomatoes because originally I thought that we had Get Stuffed and then Crimson Cushion. Crimson Cushion is a fluted tomato and Get Stuffed is a round tomato, and now I'm thinking that this is my Crimson Cushion and this one must be my Get Stuffed right here. So I got those mixed up. Always label your plants. I never label my plants. I am super confident that I'm just gonna remember exactly everything, where I planted it and everything. I just proved myself wrong. Maybe next year I'll label a little better so I can know. But these are super productive. We have more large barred boar up here. We have a massive large barred boar right here. And he's just taking over and growing all down this way. We also have some Paul Robesons that are nice and big, growing all over the place. Look up there. Wow, the tomatoes just keep going and growing. And don't even get me started on this Ronde Denise. This is a summer squash, and he is taking over so much space. The garden's really growing this week. Now, tomato-wise, I am gonna harvest some tomatoes, but I'm gonna do it from the other side, so we'll come back to these. While we're over here though, I do want to show you some really neat things on my wall of green. This is my melon wall. On the end, I have my muncher cucumber. And on my July 11th garden tour, which is a week ago, my muncher cucumber was this tall. And now he's all the way up here. So he's grown pretty good this week. And this week he started producing a ton of flowers. which gives me hope that we might get some real cucumbers this year after all. This week my Kajari melons have started taking off. We have Kajari melon. There's one back there. We've got more over here. Lots of Kajari melons, which is making me so excited. The Kajari melon is actually one of the things that I was most excited about to grow this season. And there it is. I have my very own Kajari melon. Really excited about that. I thought nothing would excite me more than seeing some Kajari melons, and I'm wrong again. There is something more exciting than a Kajari melon, and that is that today I'm gonna harvest my very first Armenian Yard Long Cucumber. Armenian Yard Long Cucumbers, they snuck up on me this season. I actually did get this one as a win this year when I was shopping on Baker Creek. They have so many different seed varieties, and I'm not sponsored by them, but I just want to share that I have not been disappointed by them yet. And they have so many cool, interesting varieties that I've never even heard of until I went onto their website and looked at all of their varieties. So, not sponsored, but I am going to go ahead and leave a link to Baker Creek's website below, because if you are a gardener, then there's something for you there. The seeds are just amazing. So many cool varieties. And the Armenian Yard Long Cucumber, to me, I had never heard of it before, and I put it in my cart and I bought it, and it is, this wall of green is Armenian Yard Long Cucumbers. And look at this. That's the little one. We also have this big boy down here. I'm gonna have to get some clippers to pick him off. Now, I've done some research, and even though this is my first time growing Armenian Yard Long Cucumbers, I do know a few things about them. It is recommended to harvest them when they're 12 to 18 inches long, and I think I passed that a little bit. I got too excited and I wanted to see how big they would grow, but the thing about these cucumbers is they're actually melons. They're not cucumbers at all, but you harvest and eat them and treat them like cucumbers. So when you harvest them between the 12 and 18 inches, they are going to be more cucumber-like. But if you let them get super big, they're going to start to get more and more melon-like. And I am curious to how they would taste like as melons, but supposedly they're tougher and the seeds are bigger and it's just not as palatable. I am going to set the camera down to harvest these because I think they're big enough to need both hands. Here they are, my very first Armenian Yard Long Cucumbers. Look at that. Oh my gosh. This is so much food. And the greatest part is that they were really easy to grow. Armenian Yard Long Cucumbers thrive in warm weather, and we've got plenty of that around here. Now, I do have a lot more of these growing over here. I can see one right now. We have a little one right there. And then I have several back here that are also growing. So I'm excited. I think we're gonna get more of these to harvest soon. And look, that's a lot of food just off of 2 melons. I do need to find a spot to put these. I didn't think they'd be bigger than my basket. Look at that. Oh my gosh. It weighted the whole basket down. I can't wait to try them. So now I'm going to go around the back end of this garden, just like I did last week, but the difference is this tomato has gotten a lot bigger this week. Let's see if I can do it without hurting him too much. I don't know if I can. I might not be able to go see my melons over here. Okay, here we go. Oh gosh, that was a bad idea. Yes. Okay, I survived. That was okay. Wow. From this view, you can really get a close look at those little tomatoes that are starting to get formed on these plants. Look at all those tomatoes. That's amazing. They're everywhere and they just keep going all the way down these plants. All right, guys, well, this heavy basket right here is our harvest for today, and that's all I've got to show you this week in the garden. Now, I am planning on making another video soon because I have a big announcement of a trip that I'm gonna go on soon, so stay tuned for that. Now, if you like this video, don't forget, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, that way you can stay up to date with the greatest and latest everything going on here on our little homestead in Western Texas.